President, I don't even know how many times I've come to this floor of this Senate to be able to talk about government efficiency. It's not a shock for me to be able to come back here again today and to say, let's talk about this. I don't know a single one of the great 4 million Oklahomans that if I went to their house today, knocked on their door and said, is the federal government the most efficient body in the country, that they would say yes. This should not be a partisan issue, that government should be more efficient. Every single dollar that is spent was taken from an American in tax dollars or was borrowed so that their children would have to pay for it. This should be a straightforward issue. Every single year I put out a federal fumble report, and I'll put one out in a month or so. And when we release that report, everyone nods their head and says, yes, that's areas of inefficiency. And year after year, I highlight things like federal tax dollars that were spent paying for a drag show in Ecuador. If the nice folks in Ecuador want to have drag shows, why are my folks in Oklahoma being forced to pay for them? I highlighted things like we did a research study in Ghana to be able to determine whether helmets made people on bikes in Ghana safer. By the way, I could go ahead and tell you that today without spending any federal tax dollars. Yes, they'll make it safer, but why were the folks in Oklahoma being forced to pay for the study in Ghana to be able to study head injuries on folks in bikes and whether they should wear a helmet? The folks in Oklahoma paid for a study that came out as a book that was analyzing humans and chimpanzees in Sierra Leone and the effect of climate change on them. Again, I'm sure there's nice folks in Sierra Leone that are very interested in that. Why are my folks in Oklahoma? Why are they being forced to pay for that? I could go one after another on things that we have studied over the years, but let me tell you what happens. When we highlight these things and a little sunshine hits them, suddenly people start backing up and agencies stop funding some of these things that everyone nods their head and said, where did that crazy thing come from? So because of the reports that we put out, we're not paying anymore for helmet studies in Ghana anymore. We're not paying for drag shows in Ecuador anymore. We're no longer paying for the study on the Russian wine industry that Americans used to pay for. We're no longer funding the 3D puppets that we once paid for. We've been able to put sunshine on those things, and those things have stopped. The challenge is, how do we actually set this into a process so that we're not having to play whack-a-mole all the time to be able to take down one after another? The people of my state, they don't want to pay for those things. They want to pay for border security, and they want to pay for good schools, and they want to have good roads. They want to have lower gas prices. Those are the things that they want. So how do we actually get to that? Well, I could outline right now $170 billion in wasteful spending in the federal government just today. Simple things that most Americans would agree on. We spend $8 billion a year just for federal buildings to lease them or to do maintenance for them. $8 billion a year. Currently, most of those buildings, because we have so many federal employees that are teleworking, most of those buildings are 25% full. We're spending $8 billion a year on buildings that are mostly empty. Most businesses in America would say, that's a waste of money. I'm going to find a way to do that less. Except the federal government doesn't do that. We just continue to be able to lease empty office space and maintain empty office space. That should not be a partisan issue. That should be an issue everybody in this body looks at and says, there's something that we can do to be able to make this better. Let's be more efficient. Starting with the new Trump administration. They have launched a new initiative that folks have made fun of, DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. And I'm fascinated by the number of people that step out and they make fun of this initiative to say this Department of Government Efficiency. And then I ask them the simple question, do you know a way the government could be more efficient? And people will say, well, yeah. Should we do that? Yes, is the answer. So the very simple statement is, if we find duplication in government, why don't we highlight it and then eliminate it? If we find areas where there's tax regulations that actually don't make sense, that actually slow the economy down, rather than actually encourage economic development in the country, why don't we fix that? If we find areas of permitting where permitting actually prevents government growth rather than accelerates the growth of our economy, why don't we go after that? Where there's waste in agencies, where there's empty federal buildings, where there's federal projects that really should be done by the state or local government, why don't we make those changes? That's what this whole concept is about the Department of Government Efficiency, is to actually create a mechanism to say, let's stop talking about it and highlighting it a little bit at a time. Let's actually work to be able to make this better in the days ahead. I'm very pleased that a whole group of colleagues are passionate about this as well. They're coming to the floor today to be able to highlight some of these areas of inefficiency and to say, yes, absolutely, I see it as well. Because while I do federal fumbles every single year, I continue to also say to all of my colleagues, we should not be the only office doing this, and thankfully we are not. There are multiple offices that their staff are also looking for areas of government efficiency, and for the first time in a long time, we've built enough momentum to say, let's get these done. Let's not just show them, and so we embarrass agencies not to do it next year. Let's actually set a process in place. So, Mr. President, today I've invited multiple colleagues, including my colleague sitting at the dais today, to be able to find a moment in their very busy schedules to be able to come and highlight areas where the government can be more efficient, where we can be more effective at protecting taxpayer dollars, and where we can stop throwing Americans' dollars out the door for things that everyone would recognize as wasteful. When we have almost $2 trillion in debt, it is definitely the moment for us to say, let's work on being even more efficient in the days ahead, because we desperately need that. So, Mr. President, with that, I yield the floor to my colleague from West Virginia, who has been very outspoken in trying to be able to protect taxpayer dollars in West Virginia and for the nation, and to try to make ways to make this more effective in the days ahead.